it's ironic that I hated recruiting, so I automated it, and now my favorite part of the job is actually recruiting. This AI can interview candidates better and more consistently than I can. Either you use technology to overcome this increase in volume, or you're going to get left behind. You have some very smart, very good candidates that have never been on ChatGPT, and there's tons of them. And then there's some people who wouldn't be able to spell their name right, who are experts at it. AI, like a model like ChatGPT, has read the equivalent of 4,000 lifetimes of books. So it can interview you for any job under the sun. Say, interview me for a nuclear physicist position or for any position.
We are live on the Objective Hiring Show. Today, we're joined by Max, all the way from Dublin. Max, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, as objectively as I can be.
I love that. And Max, you run a business called TalkPush. And I'd love to hear just a little bit about yourself and the business, just so our audience can start to think about who they're listening to today.
Well, I'm the founder and CEO of TalkPush. It's a recruitment automation platform. Well, we're 10 years old. And for the first 8, we called ourselves a recruitment automation platform. For the last 2, we did what everybody else is doing. And we're calling ourselves an AI platform. And we were waiting for the moment to be able to call ourselves that. But the technology made it possible a couple of years ago. And now what do? We automate about 10 million job applications a year through the conversational AI technology. And as our customers have gotten to rely on our technology to engage with candidates, it's given us an option to, well, not really an option, a mandate to go from being a pre-screening tool to being a sourcing tool, a pre-screening tool still, an assessment tool, an onboarding tool. And once you have a communication channel open with a candidate, that communication channel can be used for a lot of things. So we're expanded into the candidate journey to be more end to end.
That's exciting. And so you're the founder, and you've been running this business for more than a decade now. How's the journey been?
Well, I'd never held a job for more than 5 years before that. No, less, 4 years. That was so. I never thought I could hang on to a job that long, but it has kept me on my toes. So it's been, definitely. People ask me. So two things that people comment about entrepreneurial experience. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I really want to do that. I want to start my own company." My go-to answer is like, "Don't do it." And then the other thing I hear often is, "You're so brave. You're such a risk taker for starting a business." And I say, "No, you've got it wrong. I wanted to be in a company where the boss couldn't fire me. So I want to be in control. I don't want risk. I want stability in my life." So, two common misconceptions about entrepreneurship, at least as I experienced them. But yeah, the journey has been a bumpy ride, you learn so much by making mistakes. So it's rewarding in that sense.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm sure we've had plenty of shared experiences, and the way you just described that then really resonated with me. And this is also the longest I've ever held onto a job easily. 6 years now for us, almost to the day. It was our birthday a few weeks ago. And yes, also I enjoy the control and being somewhat in charge of your own destiny. It's at some level, or at least a feeling of that.
Yeah. It's actually good to be, if you're a bit of a control freak, it's actually good to be the owner. And I didn't know I was that. I saw myself as a highly creative person. And of course, you have to be creative to be an entrepreneur as well. But I think it's that finding a job where you could be both creative and in control, and working with others and working in tech. Those are a lot of ends. So it ends up just not that many jobs where I could be happy, but I'm very happy in this one.
One thing I have always found interesting about entrepreneurship is just the breadth of different things you get to do. if you're the founder. It's almost unlimited in a sense. And then also having to get quite deep in several areas. So it's a weird combination of a lot of breadth and then in some cases a lot of depth as well, especially in the early years, I would have thought. Did you find that?
Uh, yeah, I think it plays well for people with attention deficit disorder who need to move from task to task. You'd recommend for most professionals to lock out a big section of their schedule to do deep thinking and spend time on things and resolve big tasks. But if you prefer to be somewhat reactive and like a bouncing electron, uh, CEO might be the job for you, because it's like, you're kind of surface level understanding of things, but you have to move fast. I don't. By the way, I'm not going to write any management books on how to be a great leader or a great CEO or anything like that. I have nothing to. I have nothing to no wisdom to impart into the world on other than my subjective experience of it. So take all that with a grain of sand. But I do think being able to bounce around fast is a good skill to have for this job.
Yes, and again, I just feel like we must have had so many shared experiences. I literally about 1 hour ago bought a book called ADHD 2.0 from Amazon, and it's going to help me with some of those focus issues. I feel like actually running a company has maybe made me more ADHD-y, if you see what I mean, just because there's so many things happening all the time. Like I don't think I used to be like this. I used to be able to really focus for long periods on time. I remember even at university sitting down there for 5 hours doing matrix algebra and calculus undistracted. So I feel like there's some combination of running a company, technology, that maybe makes it feel like it's you kind of distracted easily or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe take off the notifications on Slack and email and stuff like that. But I agree with you. It does. Well, I think the whole world is moving in that direction. So hard to say whether we're far from the baseline or not. But it does feel like we're moving in that direction mentally.
Yes, and you mentioned at the top of the call learning from mistakes in business, and uh, one big bit of business, sorry, of course, is hiring and getting the right people. And I'm sure anyone would say the difference between like a great hire and an okay hire is astronomical, at least in my experience. Um, and I'm sure we've all had people that we hired that we realized we made a mistake. I've certainly been reflecting on this myself recently, and it's something that's come up on this show a few times. How about for yourself? Like, is there a particular hiring mistake? Of course, not mentioning any names that you've had in your career that changed the way you hired.
Mm. Well, too many to recall. It's a kind of a blur at this point. But um, I mean, generally, my heuristic coming out of these 10 years is, when you're a startup, hire people who are multitaskers, hire them because they're in love with your product, and do not try to bring in management too soon. It's generally much more advisable, especially if you're bootstrapped and you don't have other people's money to spend, to grow your management team from within, and to promote from within, and to give somebody who joined you in their 20s an opportunity to manage in their 30s, something like that, rather than parachuting managers from outside. I think that's generally a good advice. I would go there, and then, yeah, a lot of the money we spent on, was bringing in executives who then had to spend the next 6 months of their life trying to figure out how I work and how other people work, and you don't have that kind of time scale. 6 months in a startup life is just so long that you're really starting from, you're starting. It's not an ideal start if it takes 6 months for you to understand how everything works, and unfortunately that's often the case with you know in this environment. So that's it. um, I could go into, yeah, I could answer this question literally in 100 ways. So many mistakes.
And yeah, hiring for a startup is hard. Hiring for your own company as well, where it's your own money. I'm interested in that lens actually. Like, I'm not sure if you can remember back when you were doing a regular job and if your philosophy on hiring was different compared to being the owner of the company, where it's, you know, your money at stake and it's your name on the side of the building, so to speak.
Well, I suppose when it's your name on the building, you want to work with people that you like and that you would enjoy spending time with, and that you feel like they sound a little bit like you. They have the same level of same value sets and same level of intelligence, and whereas you might be is somehow more task oriented when you're hiring as part of a corporation, like meaning skills oriented. In a way, you might be more objective, you know, if you're hiring for someone else, because there's less of an emotional attachment. But yeah, it was so long ago. I really can't. I really can't recall. I mean, all I remember from back when I was hiring for others was that it was very tedious and boring, and I hated it. And that's one of the reasons why I started a recruitment automation company, is because I thought it was so boring and repetitive. And recently someone asked me, what's your favorite part about your job? And going full circle, I told them, like, my favorite part of the job now is hiring, is recruiting. So it's ironic that I hated recruiting, so I automated it, and now my favorite part of the job is actually recruiting. So full circle.
And is that because you've automated away all the clunky, annoying bullshit stuff?
Somewhat. I mean, it's nice that I'm able to listen to candidates and filter the bad ones. But it's also because I guess I've made, going back to your previous question, I've made so many hiring mistakes that now I can kind of internalize. Every time I find a bad candidate or a candidate that's not a good fit, I get a little jolt of happiness from avoiding that mistake. Be like, I recognize that mistake, and it gives me a bit of adrenaline to be like, thank God I was able to spot that. It's kind of like the mindset of a QA person, where they get joy from seeing a bug. I get some sort of a sick pleasure from saying no to somebody.
I know what you mean, because I think my probably the best skill that I have as a founder, at least in a product company, is a real sense for identifying product bugs, especially in the first few years, identifying and predicting. I bet you we would have forgotten this particular corner case. I'll test this, bang, broken. I feel like I really got a heuristic over that. Maybe not as strong over people, but because the sample size is smaller, like we've had 8,000 tickets in Jira, but we haven't hired 8,000 people. But yeah, I've had my fair share of mistakes as well. I wouldn't mind sharing one briefly, actually. So the first person I ever hired, which was now 11 years ago, so in a company I was working at, I was trying to hire an analyst. I was working as a commercial analyst. I wanted to hire an analyst to come in and do, actually similar to you in a sense, to do some of the boring bits of my job, which was tedious manual reporting. We had this ridiculous scenario every month where we had to combine 8 different spreadsheets into some kind of super report spreadsheet for a CEO who wanted his numbers. And this process took days. And I wanted to hire someone to take care of that and other things. And I remember interviewing people and pitching them the role and saying, oh, like, we've got a lot of interesting data here that's untapped. Like, we haven't looked at X, Y, and Z. There's all these interesting bits of analysis we could do, which was true. But I didn't say to them, oh, by the way, to be fair, the first 4 months is going to be tedium in extreme, and your job is to automate away this garbage, so then you can do more interesting things. So I overpitched the role. And so the first person who came in quit on day 5. They're like, well, I'm not a spreadsheet monkey. I'm not going to do this. I'm sure what they were thinking. Now, not the fastest learner, because I went straight back to market, went through the whole hiring cycle again, hired someone again. They left on day 2. I'm not joking. Okay.
Now you remember 11 years later.
Exactly. I remember my boss calling me and saying, "Oh, the worst possible thing has happened." I'm like, "Oh, what? So and so's quit." I'm like, "Okay, great." And then I was demoralized because, of course, this is months of effort, and I'm now back doing the thing I wanted to automate away.
Tim, why did this person leave after 2 days? What did you do to this poor person?
I swear to God, it was the job itself. The fact I made them sit there and you copy and paste shit in Excel. I wasn't actually a psychopath, boss, but you can have your own theory. But but I remember sitting there demoralized at my computer and hearing a young guy behind me who'd been hired just for the day to do some temporary filing work with the HR team who was next to us. And all I heard him say was something Morgan Stanley internship, something. And so my brain was like, oh, okay, he's probably smart. That was my heuristic. Like, at least he's probably clever. If he's just done internship in mergers and acquisitions at Morgan Stanley in London, he's probably not a dummy, which is, I think, a reasonable assumption. Anyway, so I pulled him into an interview room and just told him about the job, hired him on the spot. He lasted like 10 years in this company and went through the ranks and leading the data function. So even the dumbest hiring process sometimes can work.
Yeah, and go find out those Morgan Stanley interns. Yeah. Did he was he pre or post intern?
Yeah, he'd done his internship at Morgan Stanley, and then I hired him as like basically a full-time analyst.
Okay. So he'd gone through it. Okay. So it'd be even better if you could just identify who gets shortlisted for the internship, and you don't have to actually do the internship. They did all the hiring for you. But okay.
Now, thankfully, was in most cases, hiring has become a little bit smarter since then. In the last 10 years, at least the opportunity has to make it smarter. I'd love to get your just general thoughts on the state of AI in hiring. Like, where are we at? What what can a large language model do in hiring? What can it not do? What's your kind of lay of the land overall?
Well, I'm very bullish on what it can do, and we released products that can conduct interviews that I would say are of a very very high caliber, meaning I would feel generally better about this AI interviewing a candidate than asking somebody on my team, or even asking myself. I mean, yeah, I'd definitely say this AI can interview candidates better and more consistently than I can, and so I think it's yeah. I think the technology, we're in one of those moments where the technology is ahead of the expectations, and where people just haven't absorbed the fact that they can do every round of interview, from psychometric assessments to culture fit to technical assessment. They can ask an AI to do it very reliably and obviously at scale and very cheaply. And it seems that they haven't accepted that. Obviously we're technologists, so we're always happy to try new things and push the boundaries. But I guess HR is going to be one of those areas where they might be lagging. It's going to take over sales and marketing before it takes over HR and talent acquisition, which buys us time to build a wonderful product. So that's nice. I think your question was a little. You were expecting a more technical answer, and maybe we'll get there. But just setting the scene for what we've learned over the last few months.
Yes, and I'm interested to hear why would you imagine it would be adopted earlier in sales than HR? Is it because sales is a bit more black and white and brutal? It's like, well, this tool makes us X dollars. Of course, we're going to use it. Is that part of the difference in almost like the culture between those teams?
Yeah, they do run. Sales runs more experiments, has more budgets, and because they affect the top line of a business, you can always run an experiment and say, if this doesn't, this could make us $1 million, and it cost it cost $20,000 to run the experiment. So let's just roll the dice, because the expected outcome is positive. You don't have that mentality in recruitment. Nobody wants to roll the dice because it's nobody wants to roll the dice in that team. No risk takers, with exceptions, of course. And special kudos to all of our customers who signed up for TalkPush in the last 10 years, who did take a certain degree of risk by choosing a relatively young provider.
I wonder also, like my observation also in working with talent teams over the years has been, okay, so maybe not particularly risk loving, it's fair to say, but also in some sense, a lack of diversity of mindset and background skill set. So, how many talent leaders come from, I don't know, a hard science background or data analytics or BI or software engineering or something like that, which I feel like would then give them a slightly more technology, data-y, AI view of things. Whereas, most of them wouldn't be from that background. Is that a fair assertion as well, do you think?
Yeah, generally more soft. I mean, like social science and psychology background. So with primary concerns to how it will impact the mental state of the candidate, and conveying a strong sense of human connections, and it comes with the job. Absolutely. There's another dimension to recruitment, which is if you don't go to a top university, but you're a hardworking hustler, it's one of the best jobs available in the industry, because you could really just work your way up, and it's a high volume. It's a numbers game, recruitment, just like sales, and the idea that job, which is perfect for an early career ambitious person, will be automated away is depressing for a lot of people who've since reached management levels in talent acquisition, because they're like, well, where would I have begun my career if I couldn't do these interviews, if I couldn't source candidates on LinkedIn or job boards, where would I have begun? And obviously we don't know the answer, because it's science fiction stuff. But that's another reason why there's some pushback on this technology.
One comment I've often heard as well is this sense that in recruitment that adding technology is somehow dehumanizing, whereas for me, if it's done right and it's good technology, it's the polar opposite. Because what could be more dehumanizing than a hiring process completely devoid of any automation, where everything falls through the cracks, and of course people forget to follow up and blah blah blah. And this is why we get into a scenario where candidates get ghosted all the time, and that's their number one complaint, I feel like, is because that's such an easily solvable problem. So I personally would like to push back on that assumption that technology dehumanizes. I assume you would also agree that it could actually humanize the process in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could. I think I want to take a different angle and say that you want to have a human experience, a human whatever that means, humanizing experience, high touch, warm experience that resembles the one you would have in a small tribe or in a group of a gathering of people. That's supposed to happen at work. When dealing with candidates, I don't know what your candidates to hire ratio is, but I'm hearing across the board that ratio is increasing. That whether you're talking about general leads or qualified, hyper qualified profiles, the numbers are increasing because it's never been easier to apply for a lot of jobs. And now there are AI bots that can apply for you and write your cover letter, write your resume for you. So you're going to pass all those screening automatically very easily. And so the number of candidates is just going to go up and up and up and up. So, in that context, there's simply there's no other way. Either you use technology to overcome this increase in volume, or you're going to get left behind. You're going to get the last remaining candidates, the candidates that nobody wants, because your recruiting time will be weeks or months instead of days. So, the debate about obviously we should make something that feels good for the candidates, and there are ways to do that with technology. Like I don't hear anybody complaining about their dehumanizing experience on Uber. Oh man, I wish I could talk to someone, because it's smooth. If we make it smooth, that's good enough. And and if you don't want to use technology because it's dehumanizing, that's okay, but you're going to be out of a job pretty soon.
Harsh and fair. And I wonder also, one element to this is that candidates, because they're individuals, were so quick to adopt AI. As soon as ChatGPT came out, I'm sure candidates were using it to optimize their resume and what have you. As you see, now there's tools to apply automatically as well. And so companies are just lagging candidates by a few years, in a sense, with the fact they haven't necessarily adopted the same level of AI in their process generally.
In the talent pools that you navigate, Tim, I would expect, like if you don't have a perfect resume and cover letter, then what are you doing in this space in data, in business analysts? You shouldn't be working here. But maybe in some other categories, like for example in retail, some employers are not lagging. It's the other way around. They're ahead, but the candidates may be lagging. But yes, some candidates, it's very actually. I think there's just a lot of range for candidates. You have some very smart, very good candidates that have never been on ChatGPT, and there's tons of them. And then there's some people who wouldn't be able to spell their name right, who are experts at it. So that really creates a lot of variance.
And that's a good point, though, because if you're in this sort of startup data tech bubble or vacuum or whatever, you would get the idea that everyone uses ChatGPT all the time for everything. But clearly, that's not the case.
I mean, look at the number of active users. It's very impressive. I haven't checked the latest data, but we're talking about hundreds of millions, not billions like Google.
Yes. What about in terms of interviewing specifically? Like, what are you currently seeing AI as an interviewer versus, let's say, a more traditional human interview?
Advantages of the AI interviewer is that it is able to work faster with all the context of all the conversation, everything, all the interactions that you as an employer and the candidates have had is in its awareness. So it will never ask the candidate to repeat itself unless you specifically design the AI to ask the candidate to repeat itself. So it's sort of has a level of awareness of the candidate, which as a human you don't have. You may have read their LinkedIn profile quickly before the interview. You may have browsed through some interview notes. You may have even looked at the communication history in your ATS, but not to the degree where you know everything, every word that's been said by the candidate from the moment they heard about you to the moment they're talking to you right now, this minute. So that level of awareness is much higher. Obviously, AI has also read the equivalent of 3,000 lifetimes of, like a model like ChatGPT 4 has read the equivalent of 4,000 lifetimes of books. So it can interview you for any job under the sun. Say interview me for a nuclear physicist position or for any position. So it's just got immense range, whereas recruiters have to do really deep dive into a domain in order to sound halfway competent. Even somebody who's been recruiting for IT for like 3-4 years, if they're not a developer, if they're not an engineer, the candidates are going to smell it within like 10 minutes. So there are other dimensions, but I'll stay there for So I don't take the next 20 minutes reciting them, but these are two new ones.
Yes, and it's part of the issue then that, like, I'm just trying to think why haven't we necessarily accepted where we're at with AI? Is it because it's happened so quickly? Is it because the implications of accepting how good it is are too profound for us to even contemplate? Is that part of the problem?
I think so. I think it's like when we discovered that Earth was not in the center of the universe, and then we discovered that the sun was not in the center of the universe, and these discoveries were made, and then it took hundreds of years for humanity to absorb these shifting moments where, and I think we're in the middle of a shift where, yeah, we're not the smartest entity anymore in some domains. We may still have the lead in a few domains, but we definitely lost at chess. And I think we're about to lose at interviewing or in the midst of losing at interviewing. And these are not easy things to recognize and accept. So I think that it's going to take maybe a generation, 20 years. And by then, of course, the technology will be so good that it'll be undeniable.
I wonder if also it's just uh, once we're interacting in our day-to-day lives more with this technology, it will be completely normalized so quickly that then the idea of, oh, I'm getting interviewed by an AI rather than a human will be just like, yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't I? I interact with this every day in other domains. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, yeah. It is a consumer. We have to look at candidates as consumers first. The way they consume information is determined by the broader behavior as a consumer, the way they interact with things, and the career websites, the job application form, the interview. All of these things are downstream. First you look at how consumers behave, and then you adapt to them. And you can't dictate. You can't tell consumers how to behave. You just have to look and observe and wait and see. So, yeah, but it's gonna happen pretty quickly. Um, I don't know if you have kids, Tim.
Not yet, unfortunately, but one day.
I have two little kids, one 3-year-old, and I can put her to have a chat with ChatGPT on a topic, and I buy myself 30 seconds where I could go run some errand or something, and she's completely consumed by the experience. It's very easy. So they're growing up with that stuff now.
Yes, so there'll be AI natives effectively. It'll be normal for them. I'm wondering if you could shed a light on this actually. So, uh, who is more reticent around AI interviewing? I'm assuming it's the companies having like an overconfidence in their superior ability to interview, as opposed to the candidates experiencing and going, "Oh, I don't like this." Yeah, do you have a sense of the two different sides?
Uh, yeah, I'd say most of the pushback is on. Yeah, I mean it's almost. Well, I was going to say I agree with your premise, but there is still quite a lot of work to do on optimizing the experience for the candidate and eliminating all the edge cases for an AI to interview the most natural way possible. And small little things get in the way. If you operate in a market which is bilingual, most voice AI are not so fluent and moving from one voice to another. If you're talking to a candidate in a noisy environment, the AI gets disturbed. So these are sort of technical issues that are trivial when you're experimenting with this technology in a lab, but become very problematic in the real world. So, yeah, there is pushback in that sense where some candidates, you just have to iron these things out. So, I'm glad we have some time, and the candidates aren't, the companies aren't all begging for this thing to go live at scale. But then, of course, mostly it's they try. buyers try it, they like it, and then they're just a bit overwhelmed by the implications, because it means massive and restructuring takes, you have to plan it the year ahead. So it takes at least 12 months to restructure a company, an organization. And so considering this technology is like 9 months old, we can't expect amazing results, right? We have to wait for companies to rethink how they're going to organize themselves. It takes years. It takes years for true automation to take place.
And so that's just a straight up part of the discussion. Is this technology will directly require then a restructuring because it's going to automate away these various things. That's just inherent.
Yeah, if an organization does not want to have that conversation, they say, no, we want the AI, we want the cool stuff, but we don't want to talk about restructuring and reorganizing and moving people. Then I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how to help you. So yeah, go play in your own sandbox, because we want to have real impact. If there's not a real business driver for it, then it's an initiative that probably has only a few months of existence before it gets replaced by something useful.
So it's almost like one of your qualification questions in a way.
Yeah. It's sounds brutal, but yeah, we could say, okay. But increasingly, I think the market has shifted. In 2024, there's been a lot of press around restructuring and doing more with less. And I think executives are more comfortable having that discussion up front compared to a couple of years ago. We're like, whatever you do, don't mention it. It's a human nature. You spend a lot of time hiring people, and the last thing you want to talk about is letting go half of them. It's not something that you enjoy talking about in a public forum with a potential vendor. It's not a nice conversation to have.
You mentioned voice AI, and I myself have been using ChatGPT a lot recently for learning languages, and pretty amazing as a free language tutor. I got to say, like on the voice mode, switching between a bit of Spanish, a bit of Italian, a bit of English, give me a quick quiz, translate from this to this, even like mnemonics, like, oh, here's this list of words. Give me a little clue for each word that will help me remember the word. It's kind of staggering. And how well it understands me in English, because for years Siri and those kinds of tools, like, they're still pretty crap actually, but these new versions are staggeringly accurate from what I can tell. This, I guess, really is part of the enablement for the interviews.
What are some exceptions to what you've just said? Some moments where they fell short. Do you recall any?
Not typically. One I had today was, I was trying to, because I'd read this on LinkedIn, that maybe it'd be a good tool to tell you how to pronounce someone's name. So I had someone who I was about to speak to, and I gave it its name, and it was way off. So I'm glad I asked at the start of the call, how do I say your name? And then they told me. So that didn't work so well. But like in terms of the language tutor stuff, it was really, really good. Even like getting it to take a picture of a written book, and I like underline the words on the paper that I don't know, and it can pick up those words and translate them. It can identify which ones I've underlined pretty well, as long as it's zoomed in far enough. So it's just been remarkable so far.
The name thing we've run across. There's the detecting emotions is not easy. So the most of the voice models are not trained around recognizing if somebody is sobbing or smiling. That's hard to detect, even though it's been promised by OpenAI, but I think the promise is not fully met. And then, like right now, I paused a little bit in my speech, but you could tell that I was not finished speaking, and that's one of the hardest things to achieve is to train a voice AI to know when to let somebody finish their sentences. And on the flip side, if somebody is rambling on way too much and veering off topic, how to stop somebody from speaking in a pleasant way. That's hard too. And that's some of the finer things in interviewing that, I think where the humans still outperform the AI.
Yes, yes. But as you said before, from your kind of overall view of AI interviewing now is that it's definitely a net win at the moment for the AI. So in terms of, you mentioned like consistency, in terms of having that context, in terms of, well, being able to interview for any role in the world as opposed to just like your area of expertise, but maybe not picking up on some of the finer human details. That's the kind of lack at the moment.
It it's still more natural to have a conversation with a human than with an AI for the reasons I mentioned. But the AI will be better because it's gonna ask all the questions. It'll never forget anything. It'll record everything. It's just more reliable and, of course, much more scalable. And it's immediate. So, if blue pill and red pill, Mr. Candidate. In the red pill, you're going to talk to a human being in the next couple of weeks, and he's going to interview you for 45 minutes on Zoom. Red pill, wait, that was the red pill. Blue pill is you're going to talk to an AI right now who's going to tell you within 20 minutes if you are a right fit for the job or not. Mr. Candidate, which one you want to pick? I'd say it wouldn't be 100% blue pill right now, but if you were talking to people below the age of 30, you'd probably get 80% blue pill. And yeah, maybe if you talk to people over the age of 50, that'd be 80% the other way.
Yes, yes. It's exciting times, but also the technology hasn't really been rolled out as quickly as what you might have thought in talent, given the state of the large language models now, as you say, can solve a lot of the problems. Is there too much regulation, too much red tape in place, do you think?
Oh, well, a resounding yes. But this regulation is one which lives often in a different world from reality. It lives in the sort of the political world where these laws are passed, but they're not. First of all, they're not written in a way where they can be enforced, and they're mainly they're mainly a posturing statement to say we are looking after you, and to talk about ethics, the ethics of AI making decisions, which is I don't know. I think it's a political play. I don't I don't quite understand why asking an AI to review somebody's skills or resume is an ethical question. I think that ultimately we all know that the human will make a hiring decision. And if you buy a tool which makes a predictive assessment of somebody's suitability for a role, you should pick the right tool. um, that's obvious, and I think that's something that's going to be figured out by the market. Which tool is the right tool, because it's going to give a huge advantage to the employer. So why do you need to regulate it? I don't know. I think it's very political. I think that there's um, also it's a way for people to deal with the stress, the anxiety that comes with the changes ahead, and to delay them. Is to say, well, these are all these ethical questions related to AI. Is it fair? Is it racist? An AI is a large language model based on a bunch of human beings that predicts what the next word should be. How can that be described as racist? It's a real stretch. But the argument is strong enough that I think a lot of TA professionals are falling in line with it, and maybe because it's a convenient argument that allows them to postpone the inevitable, which is you're going to have to transform your operation to take advantage of technology.
Yeah, and I think the narrative around the transparency, auditability, all these kinds of things is fair enough, but we don't have that at the moment for human-based recruitment. Nobody can inquire and ask a company, "Hey, that job I applied to 3 years ago, who rejected me, what was the reason for rejecting me, show me the evidence. Like, that doesn't exist anywhere as far as I'm aware.
It's infinitely more transparent and auditable than a human. It's so much more auditable and transparent than a human. But also, like, it's so easy to keep it's so easy to meet those requirements. To have a checklist to say I am compliant with EU AI Act because I store all the information here and this is the prompt that I use, and just to put it out there. It's not complicated. It doesn't really add any value to anybody because the model and how you optimize them changes all the time. So you're constantly changing it, making it better. So what you're going to spend, half your R&D budget just updating documents that nobody's going to read, basically. So that's the end result of all this work. And the other end result is, of course, people who really don't want to buy your solution can audit you to the end of times to postpone it. So without coming across as Luddites, so they don't have to. They can talk about AI. People who don't want to automate, they can talk about AI and regulation until the cows come home, and that way, and still coming across as well-versed, intelligent, well-positioned in the organization to make strategic decisions. So for them, it's a win. But I think it's a waste of time and money to try to regulate something which is so nascent and new and obviously useful. And I also think it's a disservice to candidates that we're making it harder for companies to adopt automation at scale, because it means that many candidates will simply not get heard at all, or will just be ignored or eliminated for the wrong reasons, because the employers couldn't use the state-of-the-art technology that's available in the market because it didn't go through a compliance review. This being said, my company is compliant. We store our data locally. We publish our AI, standards and ethics. We fall in line, but we managed to do it rather efficiently. Sort of ironically, a lot of the stuff that we have to do in order to be compliant with AI regulation, we can get it done much faster with AI. So, if you know how to use AI well, then the regulation is not too much of a hurdle, because you could just use AI to deal with it.
Yes, as someone who's filled out plenty of vendor information security this and AI that forms over the past 6 years, yes, the godsend of AI doing that on your behalf is like, thank you. Fighting bureaucracy with AI. That's a great use of AI for me.
Yeah. So something which is is a pre-AI is info security, and we work with some of the largest employers in the world, like Accenture and Walmart. So we always go through infosec reviews, and it consumes a lot of time from our engineer, or at least it used to, from our head of infosec. Now we've trained an AI to handle all these queries, and so our sales team can just ask the AI, "Oh, what about this? What about that?" and fill forms, automatically.
Oh, amazing! That is a great use. And yeah, God, I wish I had that 5 years ago. That would. What is more soul destroying than filling in a questionnaire about security or this or that? I mean, that's not what we signed up for, is it? But that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. A bit of everything.
Yeah. You have to find a compliance officer within you.
Exactly. Max, if you could ask our next guest any question about hiring, what would you ask them?
Well, I always like to ask people about the hiring mistakes that they've made, which is a question you asked me today already. So I don't want to strip it away from you. So you go and ask that question again. But yeah, other than that, how are they going to hire differently in 2025 versus 2024? how they're going to adapt their hiring practice to deal with the fact that candidates are GPT enabled.
A great question that I will level at our next guest at some point next week. Max, it's been a great conversation. I've really loved it. And you've given such a different perspective to every guest we've had. And so it's great to have you on with your direct access and knowledge. You've got like primary data on what's happening right now in the market. So thank you so much for sharing that with our audience today.
Oh, it was very liberating. Thank you, Tim. And I hope I don't upset anybody.